Guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Makita, and today I wanted to talk to you about exploring African American literature. Now, it's February and it's Black History Month, and Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading asked me to do a video for #ReadSoLit. So I decided that I wanted to dive into some African American literature and just share with you some of the things that I've learned and some of the authors that we can, take some time and read. Now, before I even get started, there are a few things that I just want to kind of touch on to begin with in regards to African American literature as a whole. I have this book here from when I was in college, and it is the Norton Anthology of African American literature. So when we talk about African American literature or African American history, there are different groups of people that really just back away from the topic because they don't know what direction we're going in or what to talk about, or really even how to set their mind, prepare their mind for the conversation. And the thing is that African American history is also everyone else's history in America. The reason why is because from the beginning, Black people were a part of America. I have children, and I know that there are certain things that are taught in the school system, but I know that they don't really go in depth when it comes to African American history. However, we are taught English history, British history, different, and then we go into colonial history here in America, and then we begin to get into certain history here, and then suddenly Black people are injected in a way that says they had no beginning until they became slaves. And it's really unfortunate that that is where our history and our literature starts many times, but it's not the truth. There was a time where history was taught differently, and there were a group of people who had historical anthologies or historical texts that included the history of Black people. And there were people who were not slaves, as we learned about in the movie and the book 12 Years as a Slave, where before the man became a slave, he was actually a free man. There are a lot of different texts that talk about how our people were not slaves first. So when we go to school here in America, and when our children go to school, the first thing that they begin to learn about us as a people being successful starts with Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. And the thing is that is not where we begin. We've been on this earth as long as every other people have been on this earth. And although people of brown skin, Black people, did not always speak English and did not always write English, they still had texts, they still had writings, they still had language. And so when Black people were brought to America, they were brought from certain regions of Africa and certain regions of the other side of the world. And coming over here, we had certain tendencies, culture, language, certain things that we did with music, and a large majority of what Black people did was spiritual and musical, and not only connected to the intellect, but it also connected to the soul. So one of the approaches that I want to take with you here is to explain to you how I learned certain things about African American literature and African American history through the usage of this book, the Norton Anthology of African American Literature, and through what the editors had to say. Now, when we get into the preface and the introduction of this book, and I did not read the whole thing, of course, it is so much in here. It's just like a journey. This is a course in a book, and that is one of the things that the editors tell us, is that this book was created in a way that would allow the purchaser of the book to be educated on African American literature all at one time using this text alone. And so this is the second edition. Right now they have the third edition out, and it's now in 2 separate books. But one of the things that many professors were saying, that they really wanted to be able to teach African American literature in college, but they just didn't feel like they had the sources. They would have to go out and recommend or require so many different texts that people wouldn't be able to afford the classes or the textbooks. They will also have to gain copyright, gain the rights to be able to use certain texts that were not just put in a book form anyway. So when the editors came together, they decided that they really wanted to be able to compile as much as they could into one book that would allow the reader to get a general understanding of who Black people are, who African American people are, where we come from, what does our voice sound like, what are the grains that run through our lives and find themselves in our literature. Because really, when we look at how we've had to study, if you've ever had to take a college course, or even if you don't, if you're in high school, we study Shakespeare, we study different types of, we've learned Greek and Roman mythology, and when you do that, you learn things about the people. You learn what type of people they are, where they come from, what their culture is, what their beliefs are, what do they believe spiritually, what do they like to eat, how they handle themselves in relationships with one another. And when we as a people don't educate ourselves or our young people about African Americans or Black people, then we miss out on who Black people are. You miss out on who I am. You miss out on who my ancestors are. You miss out on who we are as a people, because our literature is missing. So when they put this together, it really was for the purpose of saying, step into the world of the African American and learn their story. Learn the good and the bad. Learn what they love and what they hate, and see how their art has influenced our culture. Learn how their hands were used to build this society. Learn what was taken from us and what we had to fight for, and what we're still fighting for in many ways. And so I know that in reading the preface and reading the introduction from the editors, I was really thankful for their honesty, because I really thought that they were going to remove some things that were hard to discuss, because as we know, there are many aspects of African American history that are just too hard to talk about. But the thing is, we must talk about them. We can't run away from them. And it's true that when there's a quote in here, I did so much highlighting, and I put like little sticky notes on the side. There's so much more that I have to read, but there were certain things that just really stuck out. And one of them is this concept of, well, let me read you this quote. It says, and this is a quote by Victoria Earle Matthews from 1895. The lesson to be drawn from the curiosity glance at what I may call the last, present, and future of our race literature, apart from its value as first beginnings, not only to us as people, but literature in general, is that unless earnest and systematic effort be made to procure and preserve the transmission to our successors, the records, books, and various publications already produced by us, not only will the sturdy pioneers who paved the way and laid the foundation for our race literature be robbed of their just due, but an irrevocable wrong will be inflicted upon the generation that shall come after us. This really, for me, embodied what we do, like on book, even in BookTube, how we love books. It embodied the concept of writing down our story, not only for us, but for those who are coming after us. And she wrote that we track and journal and publish and figure out how to package our story so that not only are we preserving who we are, but the past, preserving their story, the people who came before us, and educating those who come after us. Because it is so important that we learn who we are and where we come from. And unfortunately, as African American people, we have been robbed of our history. There's a lot that we don't know. I remember when I was doing an ancestral tree and I got to a certain point and there was no way to tell who my ancestors were. There was no way to tell what country they came from, or the names got so mixed up because there were so many Marys, or it just the records were not kept correctly. I know a woman who her birthday is not right because at the time when she was born, the registries were not kept intact the right way for African American people here in this country. So this quote really just embodied for me the spirit of encapsulating who we are as a people in literature. So there's another concept that they talk about here in this text, which is the idea of the talking book. And it comes from, and I don't know if I'm gonna say his name right, but his name is James Albert Asakwa Gronoswa. I will put his name at the bottom here so you can see it. But it says that he is the author of the first full-length Black autobiography, and it's called An African Prince. It was written in 1770. And so the thing is, it's a slave narrative, but one of the things that he talks about is how, and this is the general concept of where they get, how they're building this anthology, and it's rich. It's really a really rich concept. He says that his master used to read prayers, and he didn't realize that the books talked. But as his master, who when he talked to him did not seem like a kind person or anything, the book talked to his master. And as his master read the book out loud, the book then talked to him. And then one day he went and he grabbed the book and he tried to read it, but because he could not read the words, because he could not understand the writings, the book didn't talk to him. And what he concluded from that experience was that not even the book liked him because he was a Negro. And so the thing is that, and he said because he was Black, he said that everything despised him because he was Black. And so the thing is that these concepts that were absorbed in slavery and carried on throughout generations, they find themselves in our literature, and our people are always contemplating and thinking about where we fit in. Like, where do we fit in movie? Where do we fit in song? Where do we fit in literature? And it's very unfortunate, but every time that we were able to not just fit in but create our own, somehow it was taken away, it was stripped. There was something in here that I really I even told my kids about it. When they began to talk about Phyllis Wheatley, who was a slave young girl, and she her slave owners brought her from, I believe it was Britain, but they brought her to America, and she was, they had taught her to read. And at this point in America, black people were forbidden to read. The slave owners used to teach their slaves to read so that they could do their work. Perhaps they had to keep track of certain things in books and other things like that. But what began to happen was they were being educated. And the way that I explain it to my children is, if you're receiving free labor and what you're doing is immoral in the eyes of people who you believe matter and those who make decisions, then you have to come up with a way to make what you're doing moral. So one of the things that was done was that black people were made to seem like animals, like apes and things like that. And they said if they can't read, write, or create art and science, if they can't contribute to these things in any way, then they're not human. So I've been exploring African American literature slowly in my own way, because the details are not easy to take in, you know, but I need to read them. I want to read them. So a while ago, I picked up this anthology and I went to one of the slavery writings, and I learned this story of a slave that she actually learned how to write, and she began to journal her story. And her story was, to me, worse than anything I could imagine, especially reading it from her perspective. You know, sometimes we're told someone's story, but it's so different when we actually read their story. And so as I read it, I cried. And I really wanted to stop reading it, but I kept on reading because I just felt like she took the time to write the story down. And I really don't know if her purpose in writing it was for later generations, or if it was just a way of self-expression because of everything that she was going through and the necessity to need to be able to express herself. But I was thankful. I was thankful that she wrote it down. I was thankful that I was able to read it. It took me, it was hard to process. It caused me to ask a lot of questions. It made me wonder about life, but it was good that I read it. And so that's kind of what happens when we read African American literature. You know, we get a certain people's perspective. We get what happened before we got here. We get what life was like for them, what the struggle was like, and even what their hopes and their dreams were for us today. And I feel so thankful to be able to have the life that I have and the experiences that I have, but I know that they did not come without a cost. So I just like to say that, you know, we should all be taking the time to explore African American literature. We are always introduced to different types of literature, different types of histories, different types of writings, but this one is one that people really stray away from, and we shouldn't. Because like I started off saying when I first started this video, is that African American literature it's about my history, it's about your history, it's about the history of America, and in many ways the history of the world, because we have had a lot to do with how this world has formed. And so it's Black History Month, it's February, but we should always be taking the time to add African American literature to our bookshelves, to learn of people who have a story to tell just like we do others, and not shy away. And so if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I am going to list some of the different authors that are listed in this anthology. I'm not going to list all of them, but just some authors from this anthology. I'll put it on my website with the time period and the specific authors and some of the works that are listed here, so that you can, pick them up, or, take some time to get them from their library and just read them and learn the voice of the people. Because I just finished watching Black Panther, and it was really invigorating to see a different perspective in the entertainment industry. But that's a video for another time. So until next time, thank you so much for stopping by, and thanks for watching. Bye.